Circumstances.
No. It's hard to
So what's going on Friday?
No, we're hoping that our kids are coming this weekend. So it's Friday for him.
No, but it's a day like that.
I heard something similar.
They might tell.
I don't think
What
so.
do they
I don't
need
think
to
so.
know?
Might find out.
No, she is not.
But if you read two cases, that says, they would tell me. I'm sure they would. And I think they may know.
Hopefully if you have lunch.
Were you? It's not very
Hopefully if you have lunch with Lou
Oh, I know, right?
Exactly.
Lou knows everything about everything. Let's go to lunch.
No.
Still first.
I don't know, so I'm trying to. I didn't know where it was.
Something. Exactly. That on?
Okay, Chebra. Good evening, Erev Tov. Want to welcome everyone here to give a greeting to Rabbi Professor Avram Steinberg, who's here with us to discuss war in light of halacha. We named it a little bit different, what Jewish law has to say about the ethics of war, milchama b'halacha. Rav Steinberg is the Associate Clinical Professor of Medical Ethics at the Hebrew University Hadassah Medical Center in Jerusalem. He's the author of the Encyclopedia of Jewish Medical Ethics and was awarded the prestigious Israel Prize in 1999. He's the Senior Pediatric Neurologist at Shaare Zedek Medical Center in Jerusalem and Director of the Medical Ethics Unit, the Beit Midrash, literally within a hospital, which is incredible. Only Jewish hospital in the Jewish state could have such a thing. He's the head of the editorial board of the Talmudic Encyclopedia and the director of the Yad Harav Herzog Institute. It's an incredible honor to have Rav Steinberg here, to have his wife Lynn here, and Benny Gur, who's here as a Talmud and someone who's very instrumental in the Talmudic Encyclopedia and all the exciting things that it's been doing, is going to give us a few words about the latest volume. Yes?
Shalom to all of you. Erev Tov, it's a great privilege to be here. And my question to you, how come our two young guys spending the time being away from Israel, where his grandson was wounded in the army, and my son, father of five, is in the front line of Gaza, what exactly we are doing abroad outside Israel? And the reason is that we're here because we have a feeling that we have a mission. In our age, they don't take us to the army, to the reserve, but we put ourselves into the reserve service of the Jewish people, trying to share a very special project that we initiated these days in the Encyclopedia Talmudit. We have initiated something that looks like a book that has a cover, that have printed letters, but this is much more than a book, and I'll be more than happy to explain you what is exactly behind the scene. So far, the Talmudic Encyclopedia, with the leadership of Professor Avraham Steinberg, had published 51 volumes of the Talmudic Encyclopedia. It was established in the midst of the Shoah in 1942 by the two Rabbanim, Bar-Ilan, Arav Bar-Ilan and Arav Zevin, and their view was that their contribution to the Jewish future existence would be putting up the project of the Talmudic Encyclopedia, gathering and collecting from all aspects of the halachic literature 2,500 entries that reflect the principles of the Jewish law, and this will be their contribution to generation to come. Doing that unbelievable work, we have different topics that we are gathering from that ocean of information, and we are focusing on specific subjects. One of them is this initiation called the Milchama Leor HaHalacha, and this is the first war that the Jewish people have the ability to gather from the whole work of the Talmudic Encyclopedia. What is the Jewish profile of a war? Principles, guidelines, philosophical instructions, and we were asked by the military chief cabinet of the Israeli army to contribute to all Batei Knesset, all over Tzahal, all over the IDF, and to the all Rabbanim Tzveim, all the military rabbis, and all those soldiers, thousands of them, soldiers that are mitzvot observers that would like to have with them this token of spiritual resilience to do a war inside from the Jewish spirit. And that's exactly what we are trying to do. We just last week hand over to Tzahal 2,500 books that will be delivered all over. And we are trying to attract Jewish people who have the understanding the combination between reality, war, and Jewish principles to have those information and book within the Chayalim of Tzahal that would like to appreciate that. This coming Wednesday, we are invited to Toronto to present our project because one of the top generals in the Israeli army, Colonel Jonathan Steinberg, not related to Professor Steinberg, who was killed in the first day of the war, okay, his grandparent and mother made Aliyah from Clinton Park in Toronto. And they would like to dedicate a volume naming and honoring Colonel Jonathan Steinberg. So I'm leaving with you, Rabbi, this volume. I'm leaving you here an option to join this project. And it's very, very inexpensive, okay, as far as being able to contribute to one of the Israeli soldiers this book. If your community will come up with 500 books of this, you will have a name addition to your community. And each book donation is only twice high, $36, so it's really not a limitation. And if you come up to 500, you'll have your addition and your contribution directly into the front line of Tzahal. Toda rabba.
Thank you. Birshut Amar Da'atra, thank you very much for inviting us for this evening. And I would like to share with you some of the issues that war presents to halacha. And there are two general types of discussions. One type are the principles, the definitions of different kinds of war and sources already from the Chumash on how to conduct a war from a halachic point of view. That is covered, as Benny described in this book, all the sources from the Chumash till the latest poskim on how to conduct a war and what type of a war is related to, and I'll explain it in a minute. The second set of issues, which is not covered by this book, are current specific issues that religious soldiers are facing when they have to fight in the war. There are many questions, halachic questions, that we are being asked by officers, by soldiers, how to conduct themselves within a war, taking into account the difficulties that a war presents to the regular routine way of life, which we have Taryag mitzvot, we have hundreds of customs and laws, but during the war, things change, and it's not always simple to fulfill everything, and whether it's right or wrong, that is the questions that we are being asked. So on the principle side of it, without going in too much details, there are two types of wars according to halacha. There is one type that is called milchemet mitzvah, and there's another type which is called milchemet reshut. Without going into too many details on the definitions of these two types, within milchemet mitzvah, the Rambam at least defines three wars. One is the war against the 7 peoples that were inhabiting Israel before Yehoshua came and conquered the state. These are called Shivat Amamim. And there was a Milchemet Mitzvah to kill, eradicate all those Shivat Amamim in order for the Jews to replace them and inherit Eretz Israel, which was promised to the Jews. The second Milchemet Mitzvah is Milchemet Amalek. Any Amaleki person that we can identify is to be killed, because that is Milchemet Mitzvah. Again, without going into all the reasons why they were enumerated differently than any other nation in the world, but that is a biblical commandment. These two Milchamot Mitzvah don't exist anymore, because these people don't exist. There are no descendants of the Shivat Amamim, and there are no descendants that we can identify that are Amalek. And therefore, there is no such Milchemet Mitzvah anymore. The third Milchemet Mitzvah that, that the Rambam defines is Ezrat Yisrael Miyad Tzar, which is saving Jews from an enemy that comes to fight them. And in fact, that's the only war that can be conducted nowadays. There is no other type of war that can be conducted. As we said, the two other Milchamot Mitzvah don't exist, merely because there are not such people. And Milchemet Reshut, both halachically and internationally, can't be engaged. Perhaps what Russia is doing to the Ukraine could be called the Milchemet Reshut. They decided they want to expand their territory, and that's why they went to fight. There's no mitzvah involved in it, and I don't think that it's right to begin with, but certainly it perhaps is a Milchemet Reshut. But from a halachic point of view, we can't engage in a Milchemet Reshut, because for a Milchemet Reshut, you need Sanhedrin to approve it. You need Urim V'Tumim to ask whether you will win this Milchemet Reshut or not, and we don't have Urim V'Tumim. So actually, halachically, not only by international law, we can't be engaged in a Milchemet Reshut. So the only war that can be conducted nowadays is a Milchemet Mitzvah of Ezrat Yisrael Miyad Tzar. And in fact, unfortunately, in the 75 years of the existence of the state of Israel, we unfortunately had almost every decade a Milchemet Mitzvah of Ezrat Yisrael Miyad Tzar. This type of war can be divided into two subtypes. One is when the enemy already attacked Jews and we are fighting them back. And the other one is a preventive war, where we know that they are trying to come against us, and in a preventive way, we start the war. All the wars that we were engaged in Israel during the 75 years were actually responding to terrorists or a country that attacked us. Perhaps the 6-Day War can be regarded as a preventive war, although they started with some measures that were clearly towards war, but they actually didn't start the war, and we started the war. But halachically speaking, both types are milchemet mitzvah, because the concept is that we are fighting to save ourselves from the enemy. So we are talking clearly about a milchemet mitzvah. Now, the principles of a war from a Jewish point of view is that it has to be morally justified, and it has to be conducted in a moral way, from a halachic point of view. The morals of war are sometimes different than the morals of us sitting here quietly in a room and not having to be in such a difficult circumstance, but still there are rules and guidelines on how to conduct a war in a moral way. Now, an important definition of war from a halachic point of view that will relate to how we do it morally has to do, for instance, with the question of besieging the enemy, surrounding the enemy from all sides and fighting them until we win the war. So halachically, there must be an opening on one side of the matzor, of the besiege, so that whoever wants to run away and save his life can do it. The question that is asked halachically is it only in a milchemet reshut, where we want to expand our land and we are not actually performing any mitzvah, we are attacking people, and we should leave some way for those who don't want to fight and want to run away? Or does it apply to milchemet mitzvah as well? Now, clearly, it doesn't apply to milchemet Amalek and to the 7 countries, because the Torah says, Lo techayeh kol neshama. The mitzvah is to kill each and every one of them. If the mitzvah is to kill everyone, how can you leave an opening for some of them to run away? So that certainly doesn't apply to them. In milchemet reshut, it certainly does apply, because we just want to expand. So whoever doesn't want to fight, wants to leave, then it's good for him to leave. The question is, does it apply to milchemet mitzvah of Ezrat Yisrael miyatzar? We want to kill all those who want to kill us. Why should we give them away to run away? So that is a machlokes between the Rambam and the Ramban. According to the Rambam, indeed, there is no obligation to leave an opening for milchemet mitzvah, even if it is Ezrat Yisrael miyatzar. But according to the Ramban, in this case, you also have to let those who are seemingly uninvolved and want to save their own life and therefore give them a way out. And there are 2 reasons why we should leave some way for some people to run away. One is a moral reason, not to kill someone who doesn't want to fight. He says, I don't want to fight you. Just let me out and I'll go away. And why not do it? Otherwise, you create a feeling of cruelty within yourself by killing everyone, including those who are telling you we want to run away. The other reason for it is a tactical military reason, because the less people that are in this besieged area, the less danger is it for our part to fight them. If there are some who run away, we don't have to fight them anymore, so we are not in danger. So it's a tactical issue. Interestingly, in modern Israel, there was such a debate what to do, whether to leave an opening to some to run away, in the first Lebanon war in 1982, where Israeli army besieged Tripoli, which is a city in Lebanon, And in that city where Arafat and his supporters entrapped, besieged by the Israeli army, and there was an ongoing debate, both military, politically, as well as halachic, whether in this case we should let an opening for whoever wants to run away. The military decided that it's too risky to fight everyone by enclosing the whole city and then going from house to house and endangering our own soldiers. And therefore, they let an opening, and Arafat managed to run away. And he went to Tunisia, and he started Ashraf, and we know the rest is history, what he did to the Jews and to the situation between us and the Palestinians. So retrospectively, probably it was a mistake. If we would go according to the Rambam, that you don't let an opening and you kill whoever you can kill, who is your enemy, maybe history would have looked differently. And in fact, at that time, there was a dispute between two leading rabbis at the time, between Rav Goren, who was the chief rabbi of the army, and a Rabbi Israeli, who was one of the greatest poskim at the time. And their arguments were whether to accept the Rambam or to accept the Ramban. Rav Goren said we should go according to the Ramban, and therefore halachically we should have an opening. And he supported the government and the army at that time to leave an opening for whoever wants to run away, which included Arafat and his group. And Rabbi Israeli said that we go according to the Rambam, and according to the Rambam, it's a tactical question, not a moral question. And tactically speaking, it's better to besiege from all sides and kill all the enemies rather than let some of the enemies. He didn't know that it will be Arafat who will run away, but supposedly there were other enemies that could run away, and the consequences might be bad. And indeed, it proved itself that there was a problem with that. So that is one example of a discussion that is already of biblical origin, going on in the Middle Ages between two of the major poskim, the Rambam and the Ramban, up to the current poskim, Rav Goren and Rav Israeli, how to apply it in modern day of Israel. One of the important distinctions between a wartime and a peacetime is how to define pikuach nefesh. In peacetime, pikuach nefesh, if there is a danger to life, even to a single person, all the mitzvot are set aside in order to save its life. I'm a physician. I desecrate Shabbat every Shabbat, driving to the hospital, doing all kinds of procedures that halachically are forbidden to do on a regular basis, but I'm doing it in order to save a life. A war certainly is a situation of pikuach nefesh. For every soldier and every person who is engaged in the war, his life is at least a safek pikuach nefesh, which halachically is equal to a known pikuach nefesh. And therefore, from a pikuach nefesh point of view, I'm allowed to desecrate Shabbos, I'm allowed to eat non-kosher food if there is no other food, I am allowed to do things that in feast days I can't do them because there is a pikuach nefesh on myself. However, there's a group of poskim. The major one of them is the one that I was very close with, of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, that defined war not only as a public pikuach nefesh situation, but as a unique situation, even unrelated to pikuach nefesh, based on the assumption that the war is in order to win. we go to war, we endanger our lives or our soldiers' lives in order to win, in order to achieve the purpose for which we go to war, to save the Jews, Klal Israel, from the situation which otherwise can cause the life of people. So it's not only pikuach nefesh, it's more than that. And for example, he with his broad shoulders allowed to desecrate Shabbat, to drive on Shabbat and bring clean clothing to the soldiers on Shabbat, because he said a soldier that has dirty uniform and he's scratching himself and he's upset with it, he can't concentrate in aiming and killing the enemy. That will make him less good soldier, even in that level of degree. So war has a different status as far as the mitzvot are concerned. A hungry soldier cannot win a war. So if he is hungry and he comes into a house that was evacuated by the, in this case, by the other people, and he finds food there and he's hungry, obviously the food isn't kosher, he is allowed to eat the food, because part of him being a good soldier is not to be hungry. And if there's no other way, he can eat non-kosher food as well. That is not something new to this war. That is already mentioned in the Torah. And in the Torah it says that when Israel will come to Canaan, to the state which subsequently will become Israel, you will find houses full of food that they left, that the Shiva Amamim left running away. And Chazal say, the Torah tells us that you'll find food filled in these houses in order for you to eat it. Because once you're engaged in war, if this is the only food that you can have, you're allowed to have it. Chazal went even so far to say that even if you find pig meat in these houses, you're allowed to eat it. So in the current war, the military chief rabbinate is doing great efforts to supply kosher food up to the furthest soldier in Gaza, that he can have kosher food. Not only kosher, but strictly kosher. They supply glad kosher food and Chalov Yisrael the same way as you would do here in peacetime, going far away to look for special kosher food. So there isn't this situation that Israeli soldiers will need non-kosher food. But I know from personal experience, I have 5 grandsons who are mobilized in different parts of this war at the moment. As Danny Gross told you, one of my grandsons was injured in the war, underwent surgery, and Baruch Hashem is doing well. But they tell me that they sometimes come to a faraway place within Gaza, and they come into a house that was left by the citizens that ran away, and the food supply didn't arrive yet. So they are bothering to kasher the stove of the Palestinians. And I told them, you are doing the wrong thing. You don't have time to kasher now. You are engaged in war. You have to fight. So if it's non-kosher, eat non-kosher. That's fine. There's no problem with it. But they can't emotionally do it. So in a way, for them to be a good soldier is to waste the time of koshering all the utensils to make sure that they are eating kosher food as part of being a good soldier from their perspective. But halachically, it is not necessary. The same has to do with Shabbos. There are all kinds of Shabbos shilas. So some of them are already discussed in the Talmud, in the Gemara. For instance, you don't need an eruv when you are in war. You can walk and carry things without bothering to establish an arrow. You don't have time for it, and it's dangerous. You're going out of your tank in order to do an arrow. You can be killed, and things have happened that people went out not for an arrow, but went out of the tank and were unfortunately shot. So there's no chiyuv to do an arrow. There's no chiyuv of netilat yadayim. You eat bread. You can't go now a mile further looking for water in order to wash your hands and eat. You don't have time, and it's dangerous, and it's a war. And Chazal said you don't need to do it. Now I know again from my grandsons that they are bothering. They are looking for water in order to wash their hands before they eat bread. That's how they are used from home. But halachically, you don't need to do it. An interesting question that came up is that those soldiers, some of them were a month and even 2 months within Gaza fighting, and they didn't come home. And they don't have phones. The phones are taken away because you can detect where you are by the phone, and they don't want that the Hamas will find out that you are now in this spot according to your phone there and attack you. So there's no contact between the soldiers fighting and their families. And it doesn't matter, it matters in a way, but it may be a single soldier that misses his parents or his siblings, and certainly so he may be a married soldier who is missing his wife and children. And that is not a simple matter to be a month or 2 months away fighting and having no contact at all. So the army allows a 24-hour refreshing to groups of soldiers. They go out, they see their family, they wash, they don't shower all this time. They shower, they eat good food, kosher food, and so on, and they come back with new power to fight. Now, these turns are turns that are determined by masses, that the army decides. There are many people, it's not an individual, it's are groups. And it can happen that they are released on Shabbos. That's their 24 hours. Or even worse so, they are released on Friday and they have to come back on Shabbos. Or they are released on Shabbos and they have to go to their family and come back maybe on the same Shabbos or even Sunday. Now, are they allowed to drive on Shabbos home or from home to the army? So certainly to drive back to the war, that is certainly allowed. That is for a purpose of pikuach nefesh. We as physicians are doing it every Shabbos. We are driving to the hospital in order to take care of patients. So the pikuach nefesh of the patients in the hospital are very similar to the pikuach nefesh of coming back to war in order to save the others from the enemy. But what about driving home? There's no reason of pikuach nefesh to drive home. Is it permissible to desecrate Shabbat just in order to be refreshed? And the answer, according to Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and many others, is yes. You can drive home because this is part of being a good soldier. If you will come home, you will feel good with your family, with your wife, with your children. You'll have new strengths to come back to war and be a better soldier. And that is part of being a soldier that is there in order to win the war. And therefore, it is permissible to do so. I encountered a question, when you go back to war and you drive to a certain area, you can't drive into Gaza with a civilian car, obviously. You have to go there with a protected special envoy and a tank and so on. So you drive to a certain area and everyone comes there, and then the army takes groups and puts them back in Gaza wherever they have to be. But if you come there and you leave the car there, the car may be stolen, the car may be damaged. So the question was, would the wife be allowed to drive the soldier, her husband, to the gathering point and bring the car back home in order to avoid the damaging or stealing of the car? That is not allowed because she is not part of the war. She is not, there's no necessity for her to be part of the war, although you can say that in a very remote way, that helps the soldier in his mood to be sure that his car is safe and so on, but that is not sufficient to desecrate Shabbat. So what they do is they drive with their car to a certain point, they put the key under the rug in the car, and the car is open, and the wife or the parent or the child comes after Shabbat, finds the key, and drives the car back home. I didn't hear any problems with it. I didn't hear that anyone stole their cars, but it can happen, but that is not sufficient to allow to desecrate Shabbat. So these are just a few examples of issues that come up that are halachically related to how to conduct the war, both in a moral way and in an halachic way. And there are many, many other questions. Let me just mention one or two more. And if you want to ask questions, I'll be open to hear. One is, if the soldier is married and he has now 24 hours to be at home with his wife, unrelated if Shabbat or not a Shabbos Shaila, but his wife is impure, and he comes after 2 months, exactly at the wrong time to meet his wife, and he can't be with her. That is a terrible experience to overcome it, because he'll come, he'll be 24 hours, he sees his wife, obviously he can't do anything, and he has to go back home. The answer to this, what we advised many of such couples, is to use contraceptive medication for the period of the war. The war is now 3 months, maybe another month, it's not for life. And if you can avoid menstruation throughout this period, then whenever you come, it is okay. There's no problem. There's no medical problem by doing so. And it really gives the soldiers a very ease of mind that they can come back whenever they are allowed to come back and be with their wives in a natural way. So that's a technical solution for a halachic problem that is so important, to the degree that we encountered a soldier whose wife did not use the medication, and he got, after 2 months, 24 hours to come home, and his wife told him that she is now in the middle of a period. So he said he wouldn't be able to withstand this situation after 2 months, and he gave up the 24 hours not to come home, not to be in such a dilemma when he'll come home. How will he be able to act? So this should be avoided, because really that is a very important issue for soldiers. The final issue that I want to raise is treating the terrorists. Some of them are seriously, severely injured. They need surgery, they need intensive care, they need dialysis, they need respirators. And at least at Shaare Tzedek, where I work, the nurses refuse to treat such people. These are murderers. They killed so many of the people that they know personally. We all in Israel know, if it's not directly related, so it's a friend of ours, it's a grandson of us, and so on, and they just emotionally can't do it. So we gathered those nurses and there's no alternative. I mean, in intensive care, there are only that many nurses who know how to treat. In intensive, you can't take a nurse from outside and say, treat this patient. That's impossible. And my argument was that certainly emotionally it's impossible, and everyone can understand it. But there is a concept, mishum eva, that for hatred of others towards us, that allows us to desecrate rules, halachic rules, so that even though halachically we shouldn't do something, we do it because if we won't do it, there will be somewhere someone who will say, you didn't do it here, we won't do it to the Jew that we are responsible for. That's called mishum eva. That's the basis that we physicians desecrate Shabbos to treat a non-Jew, which halachically is wrong. But if we won't treat a non-Jew in Jerusalem, let's say, in Scarsdale, a physician will not, a non-Jewish physician will not treat a Jew, saying you didn't treat the non-Jew, we won't treat the Jew. And we know that such things happen, not that they need this particular teretz, they can do it without it, but that certainly strengthens such a situation. So my argument was that for many reasons we must treat with all the difficulties, the emotional difficulties that it involves. A, we have captives in the hands of the Hamas. If we will not treat a Hamas terrorist in Israel, they will not treat the Jewish captives that they have. And many of them are injured, many are elderly who need treatment. The fact that they anyway don't treat them is true, but to give them a teretz not to do it certainly will be wrong. Secondly, by international ethical rules and by international laws of war, everyone must treat even his enemies. If they are injured, they are not anymore, ethically speaking, they're not anymore your enemy. You are a physician, he is a patient. You are not to be a judge. You don't have to judge them. You have to treat them. True, if they pull through, they stay alive, and they are being judged, they may be executed or imprisoned for life, whatever. But that's the job of the judges. We, as medical health professionals, have the obligation to treat any patient. That's the international ethical and legal rule. Now, if we will violate it, if in Shaare Tzedek the nurses will not treat the enemy, the terrorist, then they will say in The Hague or in any other international place that we behave unethically, and therefore we will be accused of violating international laws. So soldiers and nurses and physicians that travel around the world may be sentenced in countries that obey The Hague and other international laws. So that certainly is not something we want to do. And probably the most important part is something that I'm not sure that everyone thinks about it, and certainly the nurses didn't think about it, and I think this really convinced them to do it, and that is that the intelligence people say that a live terrorist is worth much more than a dead terrorist. Because from a live terrorist, you can extract information that may right now save the life of a soldier. If you know that this house has a bomb in it and you extracted it from this wounded terrorist, the soldier will know not to go into this house before it's bombed and he shouldn't be injured. So therefore, by looking at it from an emotional point of view and letting this terrorist die and not treat him, we may lose very important intelligence information that might save life. So if you save them, if you don't save them, they'll die. Okay, so you You cause him to die and you are happy because he deserves to die. But if you treat him and the intelligence people will extract from him information that can save lives of soldiers, that is much more important than the feeling that you caused the death of someone that deserves to die. So I think that there are many reasons why we should treat such terrorists despite the emotional difficulty to do it, because it's really very difficult to treat. I told them, you don't have to be empathic to him, you don't have to be nice to him like a nurse should be to a patient. This you're not obligated. He is a terrorist, he killed people, be rough to him. But do what is needed to do medically in order to save his life if you can, because of these many reasons that are important to know. So I'm just giving you examples of issues that came up, and I think that this gives you a little scope on how halacha looks at some of these issues, which are not only halachic questions, there are moral questions, there are legal questions, and so on, but certainly halacha has a lot to say on how to conduct the war. Thank you.
Big thank you to Rabbi Steinberg, who's what an amazing Balmansber. You just explained everything so clearly, giving us a real insight into what's going on right now in Sha'arei Tzedek, the front lines, and throughout Israel. Anyone have any questions for Reb Steinberg? Dr. Milton.
Just in reference to Pidyon Shvuyim, the attitude of Israel changed markedly after Gilad Shalit. And it seems like beforehand, we had a more halachic approach to Pidyon Shvuyim. And now I wanted to know how you guys are dealing with, let's say, halachic attitudes towards trading, 1,000 terrorists for one, vis-a-vis the hostages.
Right. So the issue of Pidyon Shvuyim is a Mishnah in Gittin. Ein podim shvuyim yeter migded mehem. There is an obligation, one of the most important obligations, to redeem captives, but only up to their worth. It's very debatable, and I won't go into it. What does it mean, their worth? How do you assess a worth of a human being and a captive? Is it a monetary decision? Is it a political decision? Is it a status decision? Debatable. But the Gemara gives two reasons why it is limited. One is that the public can't, then the issue was money, that the Jews were captured in order to pay ransom, and if they demand huge amount of ransom and you'll give whatever they demand, there won't be enough money to do things that the public needs, healthcare, security, museums, streets, whatever. You need money. The public needs money. So that is one reason, which is irrelevant nowadays, because those captives are not held for money. That's not the issue. The issue is to release their prisoners. So that has nothing to do with poverty of the public. So that reason is irrelevant. The other reason is, if you give them what they want, they'll continue to take captives because they see that it's worthwhile. They get what they want. Again, in those days, they get money, but today they get release of their prisoners. So if we took Shalit as an example, and we released over 1,000 terrorists, tomorrow they'll take another one, and they release another 1,000 because they see that it works. So that is wrong halachically to do, because we don't want them to give an incentive to continue and do it. Now, clearly, halachically, we should do whatever is possible to redeem or to release captives, but there is a limit to it. That is what halacha tells us. So the families, and I'm sure you read the newspapers and you see protests, the families are clearly right to do whatever they can and to pay whatever price it would be, whether to release all the prisoners or to stop the war and let the heads of Hamas survive in order to save their dear people. That's absolutely right from their point of view. But halachically, it is wrong, because if we do it, we pay a price worse than what they are unfortunately paying. And that is called bichdei demeh, that there's a limit to what we should do. How do you assess the limit? That is a political or military assessment, but halacha asks you to assess whether the redeeming will cost worse than the person himself. So these are the rules of Pidyon Shvuyim.
So, similar question. If you know that a prisoner that you're being asked to release, if you're highly suspicious, he's going to cause a lot of problems, like what happened with October 7th. He was a prisoner.
Right.
Does that modify when you're going to?
Yeah, so in this case, if you have a prisoner, we call them prisoners that have blood on their hands. These are prisoners, Hamas prisoners in Israel that have blood on their heads, that they killed. So those are liable to kill again. So this is too high a price to pay from a halachic point of view, as well as I think from a policy matter point of view, to release such a person, even in order to release Gilad Shalit, for instance. So if it will cost his life or cost his being longer a captive, but doing what they want in order to release him will endanger so many other Jews, many more than the one that we saved, that halachically is not allowed. That's the limit that Chazal put on releasing or redeeming a captive.
Yes.
Rabbi, you made reference to the concept of allowing the enemy, if necessary, people to leave a siege if they don't want to fight. We used also as an example Arafat being allowed to go to Tunisia, but Arafat, as my recollection was, is not one who fits that profile of wanting to give up. So why did they let him go?
No, they didn't let him go. They let an opening to whoever wants to run away. He used this opening and he ran away. So the example that I gave with him was that if you let people out, you may let people that will cause you more trouble than good. So that is where this discussion, Ramban, comes into effect, whether it's a moral issue or a tactic issue.
Susan.
Rabbi, you touched on keeping the terrorists alive so intelligence can extract information. Is there halacha on what's permissible in treatment of a prisoner or a terrorist to get the information, or what's not permissible?
No, halacha doesn't go into these details. Halacha does allow to get whatever can save life. If in order to save life, you need to put more pressure and even injure the person in order to extract from him information that can save life, you're allowed to do it. How exactly, halacha never goes into technical details. These the experts in intelligence know how to do it in a way that they get the information and with minimal endangering of the captive.
Right. So there's actually a report that says that Sinwar escaped using a humanitarian corridor from the north to the south.
Right.
Right. So this is what they do.
Right.
What is the L'ora halacha? What's the status of civilians that are used to collateral damage, human shields, etc.?
Right.
What's the status of?
So halacha says that if it again, going back to the original, if it's the Sheva Amin and if it's Amalek, all have to be annihilated, including women and children, everyone. because we want to get rid of this evil, which is the utmost evil in the world, and that's what the Torah said. It creates philosophical questions. Why kill children? They're not innocent, they didn't do anything. We know, I'm not trying to justify in humane understanding, but we know, for instance, children of Hamas are told from the beginning, as infants already, that they have to hate Jews. They train children in shooting. The mothers are very proud to make them a shahidim. We know about children that were treated in Israel, saved, other children saved from severe diseases and injuries. And when the mothers took them back home, they said, now they can be shahids. That's their thank you that we saved their child. It's a mentality that we fail to understand, but that's the fact of life. So to say that the child is innocent is sometimes a misnomer. It's not so. But apparently, looking at some groups of people that are non-involved, then really we should let them go away. That's what Tzahal is doing. They're giving them a corridor to run away. The price we are paying is, as you said, that sometimes Sinwar or someone else is dressed like a woman and goes with the crowd that has the corridor and goes from place to place in order to save himself when it's too dangerous here. He moves with them there. I don't know if it's him or similar people of his, and we know for sure that it happens. I heard, I don't know if it's true, that we have now, through technology and all kinds of AI technologies, we know the faces of each and every person in Gaza, who he is, even from his eyebrow. If you can take a picture of his eyebrow, you can develop who he is. So apparently, if Sinwar, let's say, is dressed like a woman, but his eyebrows are open, there might be a technology to detect it. I don't know if it really is so, but this is the idea. But we know for sure that such people run away. But this is the international law, that you have to leave uninvolved, innocent people and not attack them. But everyone agrees, halacha and international law, that if they are not uninvolved, if they are part of the support of the enemy, although they are not fighters, they don't have guns in their hands, but they let them in to their homes to shoot from their homes and keeping it as if this is an innocent place, certainly everyone agrees that you're allowed to shoot back, even if non-involved will be killed. Now they caught some of the directors of the hospitals, the Shifa and other hospitals in Gaza, that supposedly they are healthcare providers. They have the greatest immunity not to be injured by the other side because they are just treating people. It turned out that they were supporters of Hamas. They let them build tunnels in the hospital because they assumed, and rightfully so, that Tzahal will not bomb the hospital. So therefore they can do their tunnels starting there because this will not be bombed and that will be their way in and out the tunnels. They kept armors there. They shot from the areas towards Israel, and yet we didn't bomb the hospitals. We had to go in by foot and endanger the lives of the soldiers rather than bomb it from the air and keep safe the soldiers, in order not to kill innocent or non-involved people. But it turned out that they were involved, that they really were involved. So it's a very relative term, uninvolved. So halachically, if you have a suspicion that this person is involved, he is regarded as an enemy and you're allowed to kill him. Certainly, if they are a human shield and you have no other way to fight the enemy unless they are also injured, that by all means is permissible, halachically and by international law. But you have to prove that it came from the house and you bombed the house and uninvolved were killed as well. Tzahal was very careful with it, knowing the consequences of the Hague and so on, that they warned before bombing a house to tell, and they had the phone numbers of each citizen in this building to tell them in 5 minutes you have to evacuate the place because we are going to bomb. No army that I know in the world, including the United States, that is so pushing us to be careful. I don't think they did it in Vietnam. I don't think they did it in Iraq. Most armies do it, and whatever happens, happens. But when it comes to Jews, you have to be clearer than the Pope in order to be innocent in what you do.
Yes, Steve.
The press reports that Sinwar surrounded himself with hostages and other commanders as well. Can you comment on the thought process of these human shields of Jews, the hostages?
Well, obviously, I don't know a specific halachic statement because these are new things. They never happened this way. But if it is someone supposedly innocent, not a captive, an Arab, and they surround themselves with such people, with women, with children, that is not a protection, because if we have to kill him and they are there, they'll be injured as well. That is easy. But if he surrounds himself with captives, that is a terrible dilemma from a Jewish point of view, from a humane point of view, and certainly from an Israeli standpoint that we want to save all these captives. And I assume, I don't know, that the army has ideas how to deal, if this will be the situation when they get to him, how to deal with it. Sometimes there's a price paid that you have no choice. And sometimes the price is paid on the rescuer. Soldiers who try to rescue a captive are killed themselves because they put bombs on the way or whatever. We know with Nachshon Wachsman, I don't know if you remember the story, that two officers were killed, including Nachshon Wachsman himself, but two officers who tried to save him were killed. So sometimes it costs the life of our own. That's unfortunate, but it's a big dilemma.
Johnny.
How are we convinced are we that Amalek isn't in Hamas? Why do we make that assumption? Should we get all their blood samples? I mean, I don't understand it. We said Haman was a descendant of Hitler. Why are we giving him?
No, so I think when we say Hitler is an Amalek, that's only figurative. It's not halachic. We don't know that he was, and probably he was not. The idea of an Amalek that wants to kill Jews just because they are Jews, not because there is a reason to fight the Jews. Let's say we did something wrong and someone is fighting us. That is, we don't like it, but it's legitimate. But Amalek had nothing to do with us. We didn't do him any wrong. We just came out as slaves from Egypt, weak and low moral. We didn't know what we want to do. We were wandering in the desert. Comes Amalek and wants to kill us. Why? What did we do to him? So this is because he hated Jews, just because of that. That, says the Torah, has to be annihilated. Such a person that has no reason to kill us. He kills us only because we are Jewish. That's the concept. But this is our explanation. The Torah doesn't say it. The Torah says that you have to eradicate Amalek. That's our obligation. But the Torah talks about Amalek. We can extend it and say by ideology, Hitler or Hamas or ISIS are the same thing like Amalek. But they are not Amalek halachically speaking. We don't know them anymore. They disappeared.
Is Is there anything halachic about laying siege in terms of
About?
laying siege, in other words, providing humanitarian aid
Right.
for the enemy?
Yeah, so halachically, again, if there are women, children that will die of hunger because of the siege, you should provide them minimal sustenance for them not to die. The problem that we have now in Gaza is that when we provided this humanitarian aid, the Hamas are taking it. So now there is a real dilemma. From a moral point of view, we should continue giving them because we don't want the innocent people die of hunger. But from a tactical point of view, we know that it doesn't go to them. It goes to the enemy. Why should we give them? That's a tactical dilemma that halacha can't solve. It has to be done on the basis of facts that we see or we understand.
Rabbi, you'll excuse the timing of this question and also the fact that it comes from an American. But what is the halacha now in your opinion regarding the exemption?
In what?
Regarding the exemption, the halacha today, as you see it.
Charedim, the tour from Tzahal.
So halacha allows exemptions for people not to go to war or to go to war and only support with supplies and being in the back. So there's a whole list of people that fall into this category. There specifically are three types of people: one who built a house, a new house, another one that planted a vineyard, and a third one that married a woman, a new marriage within the year. So it depends if he already finished it or he is in a process. If he finished it, so within the year he is exempt. If he didn't finish it, then he goes to war, but he has to supply and not fight. Why these people have this privilege? The idea is that according to some of the Meforshim, these people don't have the clear mind to fight. They are now thinking about their new home, about their new wife. They are not focused on war. So they are useless. Well, what do we need them there? Just to disturb the rest. Now, there are other categories that are being discussed. They are debatable. One of them is a group of people who is devoted to learn Torah. They and I learn Torah. They don't work in other types of work. They don't earn money. They don't have beautiful homes like you have here at Scarsdale. They live their poor life. I'm talking about ideal. Not everyone is like that, but the ideal is that they are living the Gashmi life very poor, but they devote their life to study Torah. If they are really devoted to Torah, they are, according to some poskim, exempt from going to the army. Now, others say that if it's Melchemet Mitzvah, even they have to go to the army. The question is, do they have to go to fight, or do they go in order to support, which is also important for war? You need such people as well. So that is now an ongoing debate, whether those people who claim that they are devoting their lives to learn Torah are one of the groups that are exempt from going to the war. That's all the discussion that has been for many generations.
Okay, we're gonna end it here, but really, Shekov Chacham, thank you for your wisdom, your leadership, and your guidance for the Jewish people, and thank you for sharing that wisdom with us here tonight here at Israel Start. Thank you again to Benny Gore for all of he continues to do.
guys, thank you.
Nothing going on in the money.